Lance Leipold found another giant in the transfer portal and added him to the KU offensive line.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making us your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On today's bonus episode of the show, another KU commit in the transfer portal, this time another giant on the offensive line, in Nick Morrow from Cal. This is certainly an interesting one for KU because he's a tackle. What does it can mean for Calvin Clements? Is he going to, move sides of the line? Is he going to stay where he is? Just very interesting addition here that we'll get into and what Morrow brings to the table, his scouting report, and where it puts the KU offensive line. Let's start right here. Morrow is a 6'8" gargantuan left tackle from Cal, 315 pounds. He actually came to Cal as a tight end out of high school. That was a mid 3-star recruit. He gray shirted in 2022, red shirted in 2023. And then since then, he's played a lot of football for Cal, 16 total starts from 2024 and 2025. So he's going to be a redshirt junior in 2026 with 2 years left to play for KU. But this is just more large humans for Lance Leipold and company. I mean, if we're just talking KU on the offensive line, because forget the defensive line where they've added some big dudes and, even adding like a 6'2" corner and even adding some linebackers who have some good weight on them. You just look at the offensive line, specifically the projected starting offensive line. Calvin Clements is like 6'6", 6'7". Connor Stroh, who you added in the portal from Texas, is 6'7". And now Morrow is 6'8". That is insane. Now, that also should probably tell you a little bit about what KU wants to do with the quarterback this year, because neither Cole Ballard or Isaiah Marshall are the tallest guy in the world. It might be a little tough at times to throw over those gigantic linemen. What that tells me is that KU is going to want to move the pocket a lot. What that tells me is that KU is going to want to have the quarterback run all of those make sense and are things that KU is typically done a little to begin with anyway. But I think it's going to be interesting because, is KU going to build a giant offensive line that then their guys can be tougher to see behind too, from the running standpoint of it makes it tougher, for all, you think about all the motions that KU runs, you think about all the fakes that KU runs, ball fakes. Is that going to be tougher for defenses to diagnose mid-play because they're behind these offensive linemen? So this is certainly going to be fun to see all these guys come together as KU. I've kind of termed it so far is KU going to try to play bully ball in 2026, and this would certainly add to that a little bit more. Let's get to the scouting report. Nick Morrow next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Wildcard round is here of the NFL playoffs, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel has given customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost back waiting for them inside the app. You just open your profit boost pack first thing on game day, see what boost you want to apply, and then the boost lets you kind of lean into your game day instincts, whether you're back in momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply the profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Thanks again for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget you can check out our Everydayer Club as well. All right, so who is Nick Morrow? So he's obviously the newest member of the Kansas Jayhawks, but he, like I said earlier, came in as a tight end to Cal at 250 pounds. At least that's the weight he had according to his recruiting profile, and really spent 2 years just, I would imagine, developing the body and working into that position, one as a gray shirt, one as a red shirt. But what that almost tells me is that there might be even more opportunity for Matt Gildersleeve and company to add even more, weight and stuff to his body. That this was not a left tackle coming out of high school. There is an idea to me that maybe you could get him up to 325, maybe you could get him up to 330, and maybe you could, maybe there's a more of a ceiling here just from a standpoint of there still is like untapped potential a little bit, I would think, right? And so then he becomes the starting left tackle at Cal in 2024 as just a redshirt freshman, which, to think about like going you would think, okay, you're going a couple of years where you're just working on your body, and then maybe you're going to have a year or two where you develop just in terms of the other stuff. But he was good enough as a redshirt freshman coming off of all to be blocking for the blind side for the 2025 Heisman winner, Fernando Mendoza. Mendoza, who's now at Indiana, was at Cal before he was at Indiana. And yes, he was blocking for him, right? So he made 11 starts in 2024. All of them were at left tackle. He had a 56 Pro Football Focus grade, a little lower than you would want. But again, redshirt freshman for a guy playing tight end a couple of years ago. 58.5 in pass block, 56.4 in run block. He did have a penalty issue that first year, 6 penalties in that first season, a bit of a high number there, but again, thrown in the fire a little bit as a redshirt freshman. And then this year as a redshirt sophomore in 2025, he wound up actually beginning the year in a bench role. I don't know if he was, hurt at some point in the offseason or what. He appeared in 6 games through week 10 with just 1 start, but then he ended up starting the final 4 games of the season for Cal, including the bowl game. Didn't have the best bowl game, but he had an improved 69.2 PFF grade. So now you're getting into the range of being, at least average level starter. 62.6 in pass block, 61.6 in run block. He dropped down from 6 penalties to just 1 penalty. That's good to see there, albeit less snaps, but still wouldn't have, equaled out that way. 421 snaps in 2025, 672 snaps in 2024. Overall, you look at the ACC, he ranked out as the 25th guard among 40 qualified for 20% of the snaps or more. So KU is going to be looking for, improvement out of him to get even better. But the fact that he showed that he has improved his body from, being a tight end to then being a left tackle, the fact that he improved from his redshirt freshman year to his redshirt sophomore year is encouraging and tells me that he should be even better this upcoming situation. I think KU also does a pretty good job at teaching and protecting offensive line with some of their play calls and stuff. So I do expect him to have an even better year than he had at Cal, right? Now, I have mentioned before, I mentioned this with like Jalen Dupree, who's the running back transfer in from Colorado State. Sometimes a good measuring stick for did you get a dude or not can just be what did the previous fan base think about him? And that's not always the case necessarily, right? Like I remember Jaden Dawson from Loyola Chicago. The Loyola Chicago fans like loved him and are like, oh, you're getting a dog. And that hasn't worked out for KU basketball. So it's not a foolproof thing, but I feel better about it that way, right? As opposed to like, you think of Kansas fans, the way they're reacting to Lyric Rawls going to Arizona State, and it's like, oh, cool, we get to play Lyric Rawls and try to pass against him, right? Let's just say that it's not the same sentiment as Jalen Dupree on this one. So what's going to be interesting here is, does this signal a move from left tackle to right tackle for Calvin Clements? Because you brought in a guy who has 16 career starts at left tackle. So somebody's got to move to right tackle or somebody's coming off the bench. We'll get into what this all means and what the offensive line room looks like next. Thanks again for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. And again, Nick Morrow, the latest addition for KU football. So Morrow comes in with 16 career starts at left tackle. And I don't think you go out in the portal and add a dude who has a couple years left to play, who seems to have a good handle on playing left tackle and also is projecting to continue to become a better player if you're not planning on playing him at his position. Now, who knows? Maybe there's a case that KU's saying, hey, we think he can have an even better season if he moves to right tackle. Who knows? But it's hard not to view this almost as like, okay, Calvin Clements had his struggles. What if we move him to right tackle? And I want to say in high school, I could be wrong with this, but I could have sworn was he playing right tackle? I don't know. Maybe that'll be beneficial for Calvin Clements. And Clements did play better, from the Texas Tech game was a disaster. After that point, he played a little bit better, and he still is a young player. And now you have 2 tackles here who you're looking for both of them to improve this upcoming season for KU. So I think that kind of makes sense if you viewed it as, okay, Morrow's the left tackle, Clements is the right tackle, and then the interior is some mix of, you have Connor Stroh, who you added in, Tavaki Tuikolovatu, Amir Herring. Are they going to make any more additions on the interior of the offensive line? But certainly feels like you've really put that together. Another kind of interesting note among that, if those are your 5 offensive line starters, and again, they could add somebody else, but let's just say it's those 5, Morrow, Clements, Tuikolovatu, Stroh, and Herring. All 5 of those players are redshirt juniors. And I know in today's day and age in the transfer portal, the odds of getting every single one of those back for another season is probably below a 50% thing, because that's just how it works nowadays. But that is at least a little bit enticing, that like the offensive line, not only are you trying to build the best one you can for 2026, but it does have potential that, especially for offensive line where it is so chemistry based and everybody, playing and meshing with each other, that you could potentially have the same exact offensive line for 2 straight seasons if you could keep everything together if you're KU. But I think we're really going to find out how good of an offensive line coach Darryl Leipold is. KU was spoiled with the previous offensive line coach in Scott Fuchs, and Leipold, I think, is probably take a step back. I don't know how much of that is his fault. I think, point being, this is the year we're going to find out, because you can make the argument that, okay, the offensive line not being as good in 2025 as it was in 2024 or as it was in 2023 has more to do with the personnel, because 2023 you had Dom Pooney and Mike Nowitzki and Michael Ford. In 2024 you had Michael Ford and Logan Brown and Bryce Cabledew. These are guys who are either getting drafted or getting shots in the NFL. You had Bryce Foster this year, but you didn't have the same tackle play. You had pros at tackle. So I think this year is going to be a good measuring stick. How good of an offensive line coach do you have in Leipold? Because you're going to have some guys that, okay, how did you develop them? You're going to have some new guys coming in as transfers. This is going to be a good measuring stick for that. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Back for more commitment videos. Check them all out right here on LOJ.